Hey everyone, what's going on? I'm the Cowboy. This is the Persian right now. Welcome to the Persian and the Cowboy podcast.
Hello all.
And some breaking news in this last week with this collapse of Silicon Valley Bank going on. It's got everyone in a tizzy. Everyone's confused, trying to figure out what's going on.
It is spreading like a virus now. We have multiple banks that are asking for help, that are asking for bailouts, that are asking for a rescue package. This could be 2008 all over again, Cowboy. I mean, we all remember 2008. They wanted to abolish credit at one point. Things were not looking good, and they had to do, trillions of dollars worth of bailouts to different banks. The banking system was on the verge of collapse. Now, good grief. Is this happening again?
Yeah.
The market is starting to become a roller coaster, and it was a roller coaster, but now it's becoming very, very volatile. We're going into dangerous territory.
Good grief, Charlie Brown, indeed. So I'm going to give a quick outline of what happened
Do it.
to the best of my knowledge and ability of understanding all this stuff. Clearly, I have a background in banking. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But
I would trust your money with this guy rather than me. Okay, I can't even add. So go with this guy.
Yeah, invest in Bitcoin. It's going to bottom out pretty soon. Okay, so going into this, so before Silicon Valley Bank went down, we had the collapse of Silvergate Bank. And that is another kind of one of these tech darling banking systems. And that ended up spooking all the venture capitalists that were putting their money into Silicon Valley Bank as well. So the VCs are like, oh gosh, things are going down. Maybe it's not a good time to invest in all these startups. Let me pull my money out of Silicon Valley Bank just to be secure. And so that caused a problem for Silicon Valley Bank for a couple of reasons.
Right.
The first one is they'd invested a lot of their money into bonds, in the United States bonds.
Right.
And now that they have increased the interest rates, the bond values have gone way down. So at the time that Silicon Valley Bank invested in the bonds, they have lost money on these bonds. And so when all of the investors, the venture capitalists, came to SVB and they're like, hey, can we get our money out of here? Silicon Valley Bank isn't just letting the money sit in their bank. So they had to sell the bonds so that they have enough money to pay them out. But now they're paying out these bonds at a loss, because you can just go to the U.S. government and buy bonds now for less money than they had it at for Silicon Valley Bank when they first bought it. So now they're selling they're selling bonds for a loss, and they're trying to pay out the investors that are pulling out their money. This causes a little bit of a panic because people can see the writing on the walls saying, hey, they're selling at a loss. There's not going to be enough money to pay us all out if they're lost money on these investments.
Right.
That causes a run on the bank, and Silicon Valley Bank doesn't have enough money to pay them out. The other thing about banking and financials is you don't have to have all the cash on hand to pay someone out that's invested for you, right? So you put your money in a bank, and then that bank's pretty much free to loan it out to whoever they want to, seeing fit, based on the interest rates that the Federal Reserve produces. And they only have to keep about 1/10 of that total amount of money in the bank to pay people out that might need to do withdrawals and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And in most times, that's good enough. We can just go to the bank, get a couple $100, and it's no issue. But if there's everyone going in all at once trying to get their money back, then the bank doesn't have enough money to pay everyone out because it's all in these loans tied up. And that's when the bank runs into problems and it collapses from there. So run on the bank doesn't have the money, Silicon Valley Bank collapses, and then we're just left with the rubble from it.
Yeah.
So.
And that's kind of where we're at right now, Cowboy. I mean, you just look at the volatility in the markets. I mean, the markets have been already volatile ever since COVID started. We had different situations, and now in 2022, now into 2023 with this whole banking situation. I mean, first of all, Silicon Valley Bank is not your ordinary bank. It's not a mom and pop where, They have some mom and pop people, but it's mainly a bank for these startup companies, for these tech startup companies. A lot of venture capitalists have money in Silicon Valley Bank. They get money from Silicon Valley Bank. 90% of their customers are startups and hedge funds. So, it's not your ordinary bank. It was the 19th biggest bank in the United States until their collapse and bankruptcy. So, at where it stands right now, I mean, you look at 2008, what happened in 2008 under the Bush and then the Obama administration. 2008 was way worse. The whole world was going through a financial crisis. Banking was about to collapse completely. You had the mortgage crisis. You had a bunch of things going on. So the bailout happened. Trillions of dollars got pumped into the economy, and it caused anomalies into the economy. Capitalism itself, do you start bailing everybody out when this stuff happens? Or do you eventually start saying, hey, fuck it, let's go ahead and make a collapse happen of this particular bank? Now, 2008 was different. However, now in 2023 with these banks like Silicon Valley Bank, I don't want all these big-time hedge funds and startup companies and all of these big wigs to get their money back and for all of them to get bailed out and for the American taxpayer like us to pay for it. That's not going to happen. I want these guys to collapse completely and to fail, because if we start bailing out this bank, that bank, this bank, it's going to create another 2008 situation, and it's going to lead to anomalies in the economy, and we're going to start pumping more money into the system that we are already having an issue with. Where do you have trillions of dollars invested in this situation? We're going to have more, and we're going to fall further behind on the national debt scale.
Yeah, and that's a interesting situation we're in right now. Now, fortunately, the difference between now and 2008 is Silicon Valley Bank was kind of a tech darling, like you said. Right. It was more involved in those startups, in companies that are in the very early incubation stages, and they're not making much money. So they're not going to be able to pay back into their loans that they have already accrued. And if that's so it's more, it's not so much like there's a systemic issue where the mortgage crisis of 2008, where all the banks are running these terrible mortgages and giving out loans that did not need to be made. It was more of just like a couple banks and a couple of venture capitalists and tech companies. They were extending themselves, and they realized like, hey, we're paying way too much into this, and then the interest rates go jumping up, and all of a sudden, it really doesn't make sense to take these loans at such high interest rates. So people pull out and get away from there. So, in Silicon Valley Bank, in the grander scheme of things, is a newer bank to the company. I think they started in the 80s or 90s or something like that, and so they were not able to compete in the standard arena of mortgages and home loans that the bigger banks are able to do. So for them to pull in customers, they had to start taking in these risky loans of startups, because most startups do end up failing. So you got to kind of balance that out, and it's kind of a risk with it. But if you got the VC funding, then you're good to go. But once the VC funding gets spooked and pulls out, then you're kind of SOL. And the shady things they were doing with the bonds, and I think they put the money in the bonds because they knew if the money's in bonds, then the U.S. government's kind of on the hook to bail them out at the end of the day. But going to the point of so it's not like a systemic thing where this is a mortgage crisis that's going on with everything there. The other thing to point out is the FDIC insures investments in banks up to $250,000.
Yep.
So my question is, why the hell did these CEOs, their financial advisors, their CFOs, why are they allowing just $250,000 of plus cash just sitting in a bank account when they could have split that up so it's less than that amount of money if they divided it up across a couple banks so that they're insured and they're taken care of? Because the FDIC is going to take care of your less than $250,000. So that's why the average person is protected in these situations, and why there probably won't be a run on all of the banks out there. It's a problem of the rich. It's a problem of these huge companies that are investing and pumping this money into it. So,
well, and I have a thing. I want to, in my opinion, when these things happen, let's say on a larger scale, the regular people, the mom and pops, the average person like you and I, people, in our situation, they should be protected. But these people, the rich, these investors, the people that have this kind of cash in the banks and they have the kind of investment, they should not be bailed out. They should not be bailed out because they have the means to pull themselves out of it. But I will say this, which is very shady. Two things with this whole situation. Number one, it's now becoming a virus. It's spreading like a contagion. You have multiple banks that are now asking for help and assistance. I mean, San Francisco-based First National Bank is asking for, a $30 billion aid package from the federal government because they are now having issues. So this is starting to spread. I know it's not going to be like 2008 where the whole global market just plummeted, but this could spread into something bigger with these banks that are involved with these tech startups and the venture capitalists and the hedge funds. But one thing I want to point out. So the CEO, first of all, the CEOs and all these board members of Silicon Valley Bank should be dragged all the way to Congress and explain this to Congress on why this bank failed. They need to be held accountable for all the shady stuff that's going on. There should be a criminal investigation. I want to point out a couple names. The CFO of Silicon Valley Bank, who was the CFO, Joseph Gentile, I can't pronounce his last name. He used to be the CFO of Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was one of the reasons of the 2008 financial crisis with the mortgage-backed securities. They were one of the mortgage companies that was going under.
Yeah.
So this guy was the CFO, and now he's the CFO of Silicon Valley Bank.
Another one going under.
That's very shady. Here's the second name. Kim Olson, CRO, Chief Risk Officer at Deutsche Bank. She's now the Chief Risk Officer was at Silicon Valley Bank, but she used to be the Chief Risk Officer for Deutsche Bank. She's now the Chief Risk Officer for Silicon Valley Bank, or was. Deutsche Bank was involved with lying to investors on multiple things and doing shady stuff with people's money, and then they had to get help because they were screwing around with people's money. So you have two characters that are on the board for Silicon Valley Bank, or that were on the board, in this guy, Joseph Gentile and Kim Olson. I mean, why the fuck are these two people on your board of directors when they were involved in shady things? One guy with mortgages that went under, and this person, Kim Olson, with Deutsche Bank and all the lying that was taking place. You have shady characters. And then Barney Frank, who was working for Silicon Valley Bank. Barney Frank was a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts. Mr. I'm for the people. I'm for taking care of the people. And when the economy was happening in 2008 and all the crazy shit was going on, they put Dodd-Frank, that bill, in charge to watch the companies, and he wanted more regulation, and I want to take care of the people. This guy works for Silicon Valley Bank, and people are criticizing him now and saying, dude, you were all about the people, and you're all about regulation, all this. What happened? This was on your watch. You're a board member, or you have a high-ranking position. He's like, oh, I needed money. I needed to work after I became a congressman. This is all a hypocrisy. These people have their money, they're bought, they have their monies in weird places, they're doing shady stuff with the American taxpayer. This is gonna be a bigger deal. The chickens have come to roost. There needs to be a criminal investigation, and they need to get their ass handed to them. No bailout for these rich assholes, these rich executives, and any of these guys. All these startups that had their money in this fucking bank, and they knew some stuff was going on, they should fail. They should fail. And one other thing, Joe Biden, instead of going to East Palestine, Ohio, where you had that chemical spill that's one of the worst natural disasters in the history of the United States, with all the chemical and toxin spill, he hasn't even gone to Ohio, by the way, to visit the affected town or the people. But instead, he went to Ukraine to visit his boy Zelensky on the next weapons shipment and money shipment. But he quickly canceled all his plans, all his meetings, to go and meet with Silicon Valley Bank executives because Joe Biden has interest in Silicon Valley. All his donors are Silicon Valley executives, startup companies, shit like that. So this is insane. This is insane.
Follow the money, baby. And
Follow the money.
That's why I don't think anything will change, because we talk about Congress being a separate entity from these banks.
It's not.
They're not. They're linked at the hip. You know, the Fed is basically a central bank to the United States. It's kind of the world's bank now for those for those Game of Thrones fans. It's the Bank of Bravos, dude. It has money in all sides of things, everything right there. It's the global currency. We got money in this pocket. We got money in that pocket. The the United States people are the ones bailing everyone out around the world. We're the one that are funding these banks, right?
The American middle class should not be heavily taxed to bail out rich people and to bail out these companies and to bail out these executives. These folks, the top tier 1%, they should pay for this. They should bail, not to bail these folks out, but they should pay for it, meaning they have to pay a price. This is out of control. You can't just let the 19th biggest bank in the United States fail. How does that even happen?
You can let it fail. I mean, if you're doing shady stuff,
meaning the people in charge.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing. It's we're never going to get any change because the donors to all these congressmen that actually have the power to make the change are all bought and paid for.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are completely in cahoots with these bankers. If you follow the money, you all get back to the banks are in charge. They're the ones running everything. It's the perpetuality of the 1% keeping everyone in that place.
Right.
And the hypocrisy, and we should raise the taxes on the 1%. We need to take them down. They're just holding all their money. Everything from these 1%, we need to make them pay their fair share. And then to turn around, and then anytime they actually fail and they lose their money, we bail them out.
Yeah,
complete hypocrisy.
We shouldn't
complete
do
hypocrisy because it's designed to just keep them in charge. Those guys with their money in charge, they have enough money to buy anything they want in the world. So what's the next thing to buy? Power.
That's
is
all
the only
about
thing you
power.
can buy. Yeah.
It's all about power. And let me tell you this. I mean, it's just, to me, this bank it's bankrupt. It's done. But somebody else is going to take over the bank. They're going to take over the assets. They're going to take over this, that, whatever. But these banks that are starting to fail, that deal with these Silicon Valley tech startups or tech startups in general, there should be no bailout for any of these folks. No bailout. No taxpayer money should be used to bail out these banks. Let it fail. Let it fail. Let it fail. Let it fail. Capitalism is about competition. But with regard to the banking system, we need regulation. There's been a lot of oversight and deregulation. We need more regulation so we stop these things from happening, because it spreads like a wildfire in the economy. You see it right now. You had a bunch of banks are starting to complain about, we need a bailout rescue package. Why is this all starting to happen all at once? It's like dominoes. They're literally falling down one by one by one by one by one. So we're going to write a fat check for all these companies?
Well,
absolutely not.
If you spook the herd's going to run, right? It's
right.
It's kind of a human nature. Like if someone's afraid, then everyone's going to get afraid by it. So I don't think it's more regulation is what we need, because you can't just throw laws at a problem and think that it's going to work, because I think the economy is more complicated than human entities are able to understand and control. And when we slap on these regulations and put things in place that are designed to boost the economy or help the economy, it can just cause trickle down effects that we don't understand, right?
Yeah.
And I think the banking system needs more competition.
It should be more banks.
Well, there's only one bank. It's the Fed, and the Fed's the one that sets the interest rate for all of the banks. Yeah. All the banks pay into the Fed system and say, okay, we'll follow along with you as long as you bail us out when we do shady stuff.
Right.
That's the agreement. That's the cahoots that they are in with right there.
Yeah.
And
well, that's shady by itself too.
Yeah, but if you're
right,
and
I agree with you.
I've heard it described as a cartel. Like a cartel.
It is a cartel.
Yeah, because a cartel is an entity that is split up. It's not a monopoly, because everyone is in. They are not one entity, but they've all agreed not to compete with each other. Right. So they are spreading out. Okay, that's your territory over there in the west. This is the east territory here. This is our territory on this side. You guys take that sector. We'll take this sector, and then we all agree on what the interest rate is going to be. So we're all making the exact same amount of money that we have going on, and it comes at the cost of the American people.
Right.
And competition is good for the American people, because then we can get a competitive interest rate and actually determine what is valuable to us and what risk we are willing to take. You know, if I'm going to give my money to a banker and say, okay, you hold on to it for, like I'll give you the investment. You can take my money and do what you think is best for it. You're going to pay me back this interest rate on my money. And then he's free to loan it out and do whatever he wants because he thinks he can and figure out something better to go with.
Right.
But I'm taking the risk and trusting this guy with my money. And I should know that up front, and I should be okay with that up front.
Right.
I should also, and he should also have the risk of doing what he wants with my money.
Right.
You know, it's, and that's where competition comes from. And then you get better stuff like that. The scary thing is, you know, when shady stuff starts happening in like in the early 1900s, when these banking collapses were happening, the runs on banks, and the Federal Reserve was created to combat that and give people safety and security.
Yeah, like confidence.
It was supposed to stabilize the economy, but we had the Great Depression, we've had a
lot of recessions.
Tons of recessions and all the bailouts.
And the Great Recession in 08,
And it all stems from the United States government not being able to balance a freaking spreadsheet. We pay so much in taxes, and they are unable to organize that money in a way that's not a deficit. And then they go to the Treasury and say, hey, we need more money. And the Treasury is like, well, we could print more money, or you spend all the money we already have. Then they go to the Fed, and the Fed's like, oh yeah, I'll write you a check for that. Here's that. And then gave us this loan back for it.
Well, eventually the chickens are going to come to roost as a whole.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that. So there's like three possibilities, right?
Yeah.
The United States can keep raising the debt ceiling, which they're going to keep doing.
They have to.
And then or they could foreclose, or they could just go bankrupt and the dollar collapses and they don't pay back their debts and you know whatnot, right? So that's one option, right? And the second option is they could spend less money and cut things out of the budget and start balancing it and paying off of our debt so far.
Which they should.
Yeah. That, or they could raise taxes.
Which they should.
And if they raise taxes, then people get mad and angry and like, the government's taking too much of my money because taxes are ultimately theft. And then the last thing that they could do is just borrow more money, print more money, and let inflation be the tax. Inflation is the tax on the common person. The rich people don't give a crap about inflation.
Because they have the money to pay.
Well, no, they have the money to pay, but all of their money is invested in other assets that are going to go up with it. They don't hold on to cash. They don't hold on to much cash. It's no Scrooge McDuck where he's just swimming through all his dollar bills. Maybe they have a stack of gold, but that's going to go up with value too.
Exactly.
It's the common person that gets screwed with inflation because they're based on a standard salary and standard money, and that's not going to go up with inflation.
Right.
And it's up to us to negotiate our salaries from there. So inflation is a tax on the common man, on the poor people, and we're the ones that suffer about it. But it's hidden. We don't see that as an issue.
Well, it's all pre-planned. There's bigger people pulling the string. And one thing about taxes, we as the middle class, we're paying a lot in taxes already. I don't want my taxes raised. He doesn't want. But when I said raise taxes, they need to raise taxes on companies like the Amazons, like the Googles, like the Facebook, Meta, whatever the fuck they call themselves, like the Apples. They don't pay shit in taxes. You look at a company like Amazon, they pay very little in tax, if any. We have to go after these companies and also hold them to account for doing business internationally that affects the American worker and the American economy. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is buy gold, folks. Gold is going up big time, cowboy. What was it, $1,900 an ounce?
Well,
buy some silver as well.
You should have bought gold like a year and a half ago during
Hell yes, but if you can still buy gold, buy it now. It's going to go up and up and up and up.
Yeah, the dollar's down, that's for sure.
Dollar's coming down as well.
But I think it's important to, I think with these big tech companies, it's a whole other subject, but they're pretty much in cahoots with each other at this point.
Oh, they
in
are.
time.
They're all in cahoots with each other.
I mean, yeah, they're pretty much a cartel where they're not agreeing to compete with each other, and it's a wink and a nod kind of situation. They need to be broken up. They're pretty much monopolies at this point in time. Break them up, get competition. I'll say it here now, right? Big government, bad. I don't like big government. That's when too much power gets circulated in one place. I would also say big business, bad. break up those companies, encourage capitalism, encourage competition between them. Once you have too much power, you can start playing funny games with the markets and doing those things.
Right.
You need the big tree in the forest to die in order for the little tree to start growing. You know, and that's what it's supposed to be about. The 1%, it's fine if they make all that money as long as the 1% is continually rotating. It used to be, if you look at the like the Fortune 500, when it first came to existence in like 1900 or whenever that was back then, there's only like 2 companies that are still on that from there.
There's too many monopolies. You have too many monopolies. Like, even though I don't agree with his politics, we have a totally different. He's an independent. He's not a Democrat, but he calls himself a social democrat, and I don't like socialism, but I do agree with one thing that he says, and that's Bernie Sanders. I say these businesses are too monopolistic. We have to break up these companies to promote more capitalism or more competition. He says they're too big, like these pharmaceuticals are too big. The banks are too big. We have certain companies monopolizing different businesses that are just too big. Like, look at Amazon, for instance, right? Totally different subject, but you look at Amazon. They have their niche. They're doing their thing. But they need to be. This company needs to be broken up.
Yeah,
it's way too big. I don't like the one thing you and I can agree or disagree on. I believe that these companies are a little too big and they have too much power over government, and the government has been bought by all these banks, by all these companies, and now we're in a corrupt system. There's a lot of corruption going on that needs to be highlighted. But with Silicon Valley Bank, there needs to be a criminal investigation. There needs to be an investigation of what happened. There needs to be a timeline. There needs to be hearings. There needs to be everything. And none of these board members, from top to bottom, should be let go scotch-free. They need to be held to account. They need to be held accountable. And there needs to be an investigation of what happened. Because you have 2 board members that did some shady stuff who are now with this company or were with this company. And there needs to be something that needs to be investigated on this because there's more to this story. And a lot of it has to do with no oversight. It has to do with a lot of shady stuff going on in the background. And it doesn't make sense. It does not make any sense how this can just suddenly happen.
I mean, it makes perfect sense to me because you got a business model that's set up so if they want to make money, they need to be making loans, right? So they're trying to loan out as much as they possibly can.
Right.
They're going to get that interest from that.
Right.
And then if you know in the back end that you're going to get bailed out, why not make as sketchy a loans as you possibly can make?
Well, the question is, if I'm the government, the U.S. government, I let these guys fail. Fuck the bailout.
Exactly. And
they shouldn't. And the thing is, these rich pricks for these companies, they expect, hey, it doesn't matter, man. We do whatever the fuck we want. The government's going to come wipe our ass and give us whatever the fuck we want. No. N-O, no. Let these banks fail. All of them. The only thing I want to happen is that these mom and pop people that work for these companies, they need to be taken care of. They need to be taken care of. They need to get some sort of salary out of this, something out of it for losing their jobs. They need to be taken care of.
I mean, that should be the same as any,
correct.
Any bankruptcy proceedings or whatnot,
right.
Like you get your last paycheck and go from there.
They need to get something out of this a little bit more longer term because they didn't know this shit was going on. Not at the lower the folks at the lower end did not know what was going on. Mm-hmm. They didn't know. Yeah,
but it should be the same way as if you work for any company and your company goes bankrupt. Like, here's your severance package.
Yeah, there's got to be a severance is what I mean. There's got to be a severance. Not like one check, here you go fuck off.
Yeah.
There needs to be a severance package.
I mean, have you ever been laid off before?
I have, once.
Yeah. So then, it should be the exact same setup with that. Where
same
it's
thing, like 3-month package, something like that, the standard, whatever you work for 1 month for every year worked or whatever, So it should be something like that. But I want these people to be held in account, and I want this to be an example. I wish our politicians weren't so bought, and I want some of these politicians to become superheroes and to put these fuckers on display and be like, this is what these people did, this is your crime, this is your punishment, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's
they shouldn't be like, oh, and this asshole, this Who's this guy that I was talking about earlier? This Joseph Gentile, where the fuck his name is.
He's not Jewish?
I don't know if he's Jewish, but I don't know. That's what it says. That's the pronunciation of his name. Well, I don't know. That's what his name is. I don't know if he's Jewish or not. But this guy worked for a failed company. And he got a board job with this company as CFO for Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, craziness.
What the fuck kind of a world is this? So I could fuck up multiple companies and get hired by my friends at other companies? That sounds like a deal.
I mean, that sounds kind of like Hunter Biden, and him having fun.
Don't even get me started with Hunter. What a nasty guy this is. First of all, he's got his daddy as president. By the way, can I just say something about Hunter Biden? What a piece of shit this guy is. When his brother Beau Biden died, who actually Beau Biden was a better person than Hunter.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. And former serviceman as well, served in Iraq. Hunter Biden had an affair with his dead brother's wife. What kind of a piece of shit is this? And then Joe Biden was like, in a time of mourning, they found each other and they found love. Give me a fucking break. If I was Beau Biden, wherever I'm at in heaven, wherever the fuck they believe in, I would come and fucking fuck with my brother every day and haunt him. That's some fucked up shit. That's some disloyal, Fredo, Godfather type shit. Fuck that. Talk about a crack addict. He's always fucked up, going to rehab, having his daddy pay his bills, going to go find business deals for his dad in China and Ukraine and wherever the fuck else they had business deals. 10% for the big guy. Give the big guy 10%. How are politicians becoming like oligarchs, like Russian oligarchs? Look at Nancy Pelosi. Do you think a politician should have a net worth of $100 million when they work for the American public? Well, they should make some money, but $120 million? And she sold stock from a stock tip on multiple companies?
Yeah, we need to find a way of getting money out of politics.
Yeah, but they need to stop doing this.
It's a hard thing to ask for right there, because if you're running for any office, you need those donors to be able to
hook you up.
Yeah, to be able to get you there.
And you're at their behest because you're their bitch because they're giving you all this money.
Yeah.
Well, look at DeSantis. I'm leaning away from DeSantis and going with my man Trump because DeSantis is getting money from George Soros. George Soros is a left-wing liberal, older gentleman who has been giving a lot of money to groups like Antifa and stuff like that, whatever. But why is a Republican and Ron DeSantis getting money from George Soros?
So that's what they do. Where
are the Koch brothers at?
Well, no, because you want your... if you follow the money, it all goes back to the Federal Reserve, the banking systems that we put into place in the turn of the century, and how we created this central bank of the United States of America. That's what the Federal Reserve is. It's a central bank. And they just called it something else to make it sound better for everyone.
Yeah, they give it a fancy name.
They can pretty much make as much money out of nothing that they want to do.
Yeah.
And so what they started doing, and they realized, is if you write a bill, if you pay for something, and then people just track the money, and it's like, oh, it's obviously going to XYZ. That's these are the big banks behind it, so they're putting forward this big banking bill. We better stop it, right? So what they figured out, what they should do, is if they put their money into the opposite of it, then they could say, oh no, I don't want that bill to happen. This is what I'm petitioning for. This is what I think we should do. Then they make another bill that's not going to be as popular. And then they start pushing that one, saying, oh, no, this is the one we should do. This thing, da, da, da. And then everyone goes, oh, the bankers are behind this one. So then the other bill must be the one to go for.
That's what it is. I mean, Cowboy, real quick, I know you're making a point, but in the end, these politicians don't work for you and I. They work for companies that pay them. They get bought by different lobbyist groups. You have the gun lobby that's buying people. You have the pharmaceutical lobby buying people. You have different industries, the food industry.
The gun lobby, I'm curious about that, because I don't know, is it... I'd be really interested to look at their budget numbers for their investors, because is it just coming from the military industrial complex, or
I think both? Is
it coming from private citizens? Because I know a ton of people that are card carrying members of the NRA, right?
Yeah.
And so if if that's actually coming out of like every man's pocket and every person's going there and they're using their money to fight against that, that's great. But I don't know if it's coming from that or if it's coming from
big wigs within the organization.
Yeah,
they're
I
getting
don't
money
know.
from companies like the Smith and Wessons and everything, and the ammunition companies. But regardless, the main point is these politicians are all bought in different industries.
Yeah,
and if there's
both
some
parties.
bill, if he passes a bill that basically you want to say, hey, I want offshore oil drilling in California because I think it's going to be good for the economy. It's going to pump the numbers, whatever. It's going to help us with some additional tax revenue. And then I'm going to say, no, I think it's bad for the environment. It's bad for the fish. It's bad for the ocean. It's bad for the birds. There's going to be oil slicks going to come to the shore. It's going to fuck up the ecosystem. But I mean, I'm not for offshore oil drilling, but in my ear was a company whose environmentalist group that's saying, hey, I'm going to pay you about $1 million over the next 3 years, but I need you to shut this bill down in secret. That's what the shit that's going on. Anyways, that's all I have to fucking...
Yeah, so, wrap it up with some final thoughts,
Final thoughts, folks. I do not want these rich pricks and these companies and these investors to be bailed out. I want them to fail because when you start introducing a bailout package, you're introducing socialism. Capitalism is not based on bailouts. It's about competition. If, there needs to be a better structure, but I do want more regulation for this type of stuff. And I want the board members of Silicon Valley Bank, including the two people that I mentioned earlier, to be held accountable. There needs to be a criminal investigation, and I want hearings in Congress on why this happened and to get answers so we stop this contagion from spreading. And it looks like there is a contagion that's spreading from this.
Yeah, and my final thoughts are follow the money, people. It's going to come down to who's paying for what. All the politicians are bought. That's why they are defending these large organizations. When they lose their money, the politicians bend over and just throw them taxpayer dollars as much as they possibly can. And we are going to pay for it in the form of inflation. Mm-hmm. It's the tax on the every single man, and it's a hidden tax on us.
It's horrible.
And that's how they figured out they can just keep spending. We need to vote for politicians that are running on low budgets. We need to figure out who these people are. We need to follow the investments into all of our politicians and figure out a way that we can get money out of politics so we can have a true democratic republic working again for the best interest of all the people that we have here, and remove that and then bring back true capitalism. No more of these oligarchs just buying and pushing things around and controlling all of the cards for us. Competition. We need the competition.
Bring back competition, baby. Amen, cowboy. Yep. God bless you, sir. I love it.
Cool. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
He's the Persian, I'm the cowboy.
Thank you, folks.